This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode number 107. How you doing, Timothy Seymour Dahl?
I'm very busy, so I'm just have a million things to do, but we all are. You're in California now. I leave on Friday, and
Be warned, the airport is hell. So
yeah, I'm sure. I'm not looking forward to that.
Anyway, once you get there.
It's muggy as fuck here, because it rains like every night, but then it's like super hot every day. So just like mug fest.
Well, you may think that traveling by plane, train, or car is a bit of an inconvenience right now, but I don't know if you've heard about what washed up on the shore of Miami the other day.
I did, but I don't know the details. I kind of read the headline. You got to
All right, well, we're used to seashells, water bottles, flip-flops, but a giant hamster wheel? Not usual.
Was that like an art project? Was that an art?
Last Saturday morning, a Florida man was discovered inside a giant floating contraption. According to the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, which there's pictures posted online of a red, what could only be called like a hamster wheel. The agency says driver Riza Bellucci was inside unharmed. The 49-year-old told authorities he was attempting to raise money for charity by running on water from St. Augustine to New York City by way of Bermuda. Oh, okay.
What?
He ran into some problems in his hydropod, as he calls it, which washed ashore near Hammock, 30 miles from where he first started his adventure in St. Johns County. Now, the deputies, when they arrived, said that several alarmed callers reported seeing a UFO, an unidentified floating object. It's basically a metal cylinder with paddle wheels, and the long distance runner told authorities, "Well, I came across some complications that brought me back to shore. In 2014, he was trying to travel north, and he had to be rescued in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean at a cost of $144,000. Now, I'm telling you, I got a few dumb stories today, and this is one of them. So anyway, our good friend Bellucci, he's about as silly as John Belushi. I'm almost as funny. Is that he's trying to have a meeting with world leaders to encourage connectivity and planting of trees as a symbol of growing personal empowerment. And of course, he'd like to create a reality show. Well, first he's got to get a grip on reality before he can have a reality show. I don't know. This is what we're dealing with this week.
Well, that's the thing about the mentally ill. When they pull stunts like this, you always have like, the right wingers in Congress, like we got to save money and cut costs. It ends up costing us a lot more money because you have to like spend $150,000 to rescue a guy in a hamster wheel in the ocean. I mean, it's that stupid, and the math doesn't add up. My story is basically my stories this week are mostly about the mentally ill. Maybe not. I'm not ripping on that. That's a horrible place to be. But this Texas man, Philip Daniel Mills, decided to, in El Paso, Texas, set his family house on fire because his mom and brother didn't read the Bible enough. So he, it started in the morning. He basically like took a sledgehammer to the TV. They're like, "What are you doing, Philip?" He's like, "I'm trying to get rid of all the evil in this house." And they're like, "Oh no, it's gonna be one of those days." And they're just like, "Philip, is everything okay?" And then like he was just going nuts all day. And then it just kind of ended where he emptied a whole canister of gasoline out when they were in the other room on the couch and set it on fire. And the thing is, he was waiting outside with rocks in his hands, like in case they escape, I can just like maim them to death.
Well, he's accusing them of not reading the Bible.
They didn't read the Bible enough. So then the fire department comes. They pull the mom and brother out. The mom's like 85 years old. Brother, they're just like a charred hot dog in a campground, but they're still alive. And then the cops are there, and Philip Daniel Mills is like, I did it. And then as he's saying he did it, he sees in the corner of the eye the mom and the brother being brought into the ambulances, and he sunk his head and he goes, "Well, I guess that was a failed attempt." He was really down on himself for not succeeding. Well, the brother did die. The mom's still alive, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, I've got a new click going, and it's the Sin Cells. Instead of incels, what we do is we just go around having as much sex as possible to blow off the steam so we don't have to go around killing people that don't read the frickin' Bible.
You're on to something.
Saying now, if you aren't already mentally disabled for the obvious existential, genetic, hereditary, and American reasons, this is something that's going to push everyone, if not over the edge, actually into the grave. So I don't know if you heard about trash cans.
I mean, I know what they are.
Well, no, I don't think you do, because these are colorful capsules or vials packed haphazardly with fentanyl. Whoa. And drug agents are finding them all over. And the thing is,
awful.
Trash cans, which are packaged in U.S. conversion labs, homes or buildings where traffickers alter or remix drugs, they buy in bulk and package for resale. The problem is this packaging is so dangerous that even handling this amount of fentanyl poses a threat, not only to those using it, but also children and law enforcement. So it's called trash cans. And literally these are smaller. They look like a little mini trash can, smaller than a penny. And all right, if police or children or animals even breathe in like a minuscule amount of this, or it gets on their skin, you can overdose. Okay. So with the pandemic of opioids right now, it's out of control. But with the trash cans, they're saying the amount of fentanyl, which you would see on Abraham Lincoln's cheek on a penny, can kill people. So they're issuing an alert, and there's actually a little picture of it online, and it's absolutely terrifying. And I mean, there's tranquilizers, fentanyl, they don't even know what's in it, but it's the latest drug because, you know, drug dealers always want to have something new to offer the public. What I don't get is, it's like the Republicans. Why do you want to kill your constituents? Why do you want to make a drug so powerful it kills people?
Well,
and there goes your business.
I have an answer. Just like the Republicans, they'll do anything for power and money. So you save a lot of money if you cut it with fentanyl, if you're selling heroin. And so nothing else matters. It's just like.
Well, and the thing is, okay, so some dealers are they're foregoing, the fentanyl. And, you know, what's wrong with going back to just cutting it with baby laxatives, baby powder? I mean, it just seems like it's more profitable. Anyway, like I said, this is about some really dumb things today. So,
well, speaking of like police officers handling fentanyl and dying, well, a police officer, Karen Bernard, who is a former New York State trooper, retired, late 50s, lived, I should say. I'm kind of giving it away, in Florida. Super into skydiving. Well, that didn't go well the other day. They're investigating right now, but her, a parachute malfunction. Now you have a backup. So those are always really mysterious. But, you know, if you have a backup, like what went wrong? And I told you that story about the serial killing parachute skydiver from Belgium a few years ago, who would just have these kind of Glenn Close fatal attraction affairs with these guys. And then when they realized she was nuts, they're like, I'm out of this. And then she would, like, you know, kind of mess with their parachute. So they're just constantly like dying. And then they're like, wait, why are all these parachute incidences happening? And this woman's the common denominator. I've told the story before, but I still have to, it still sticks in my mind because her last murder, it was a farmer in Belgium witnessed it, where he's just like kind of in his little tractor, kind of just churning some soil, and then he sees this little wiggly black dot just whipping like a missile from the clouds. He's like, what the hell's that? And I mean, in a Belgian accent, of course. And of course it was a torpedo corpse ripping. I read it went like something like 3 meters into the soil. It was an impact, you know.
Well, you know, I can't say I've concocted the perfect way to go, but I'm going to be here for a while, so I got plenty of time to contemplate it. So I don't get this. A woman in Detroit claims that Facebook temporarily banned her for hate speech after posting a response to a meme saying, men are dumb. Now, if that's fucking hate speech, the incident occurred after the woman, Candace King, made a post about how men could not see a nuance in the difference in the shades of purple. And she goes, this is a different color. Why are men so stupid? Banned for a day? I mean,
all it's so insane.
I mean, if we're stooping that low, I'm surprised. I'm just, I haven't been embarrassed.
Lydia, do you think myself, or just, I guess, hypothetically, anyone, if they went on to social media, specifically Facebook, and they just wrote, I hate hate speech. I hate it. I hate hate speech. So if there's a big hate speech against hate speech, would you get banned? Maybe. I mean, it's technically, I think you would. Like, I hate hate speech, which actually I've heard people do that rant, which I'm like, come on, don't you see what's going on here?
What's astonishing to me in this day and age is that we have so many monumental, immense, humongous, global, planetary problems, and somebody's getting canceled for saying the word dumb. I mean, this is just, to me, I mean, and look, I don't know if you saw any of the trial yesterday for the January 6th.
Only read about it.
Well, I saw some of it. And I mean, I'm astonished how you can have, I don't know how these people live with themselves, that if you can't believe your own eye, if you can't believe video cameras, and I'm talking multiple cameras showing what actually went down there, police crying at trials, some who are just, doing the best they can do, actually trying to defend whatever remains or the lie that democracy is. And you still have Republicans going, it was a love fest. Well, if that's a love fest, my God, I don't know what a hate fuck is to these motherfuckers. I really got no clue. Anyway, let's get back to the dumbing down of America.
Please.
Alabama.
Yep.
An Alabama man was accused of breaking into a home, attempting to rape a woman, and found, when the police went to his house, with 400 pairs of ladies' underwear. John Thomas Uda, charged with attempted rape, burglary, aggravated criminal surveillance, and 50 counts of voyeurism. He's being held on more than $1 million bond after authorities said he attacked a woman inside. The panties were enough. Now he's going after the woman. So he's found in possession of 400 pairs of ladies' panties, and the detectives think maybe some of them were bought, probably used online, but he's also accused of taking pictures of coworkers from the neck down, which he would use to pleasure himself. So the police get into his house, check the 400 panties. I don't know if maybe they took a few home. And the issue is that in Alabama, it was only in 2019 that Governor Kay Ivey signed the anti-voyeurism bill which outlaws upskirting, which we all know what that is, when a photo is taken up a woman's skirt. So now he's being held on $1 million bail. I wonder what happens to a panty raider in jail.
Also, I mean, going back to 50 counts of voyeurism, that's I guess
what took him so long to bust this dude?
I mean, so a peeping Tom. So I guess you get busted once, you get one count of voyeurism, and you need proof that you've peered in a window or something.
I mean, how many dresser drawers do you need to store 400 pairs of panties? I mean, I wonder if he just got clotheslines all over his house. He just goes sniffing from one pair to the other. I have no fucking clue. I got a few pairs. They're nice, but I usually try to sell them. Personal deal.
Well, I guess I'm going to go back to mental illness a little bit, because, I've been reading this story.
As if we were just covering it and everything we've said.
Well.
Sally for.
Well, Simone Biles, the quote unquote greatest female gymnast of all time.
Actually, absolutely stunning.
Oh yeah,
work this gal does. I mean,
no, she's a virtuoso. Yeah. She's a specimen of athleticism like maybe no other. But I do have to get a little critical here, because all over the place, everyone's like, because she basically bailed out due to extreme anxiety or whatever. She's not in a good mental place. She bailed out, and maybe I'm playing a little devil's advocate here, but I do want to be critical. Because everywhere in the media, and NPR today is like, she's brave and no one has the right to criticize her. But I'm going to go for it, because she is incredible, and I don't want to take that away from her. But it's not, in my whole life, as someone who watches sports every now and then, when it comes to a big match, whether it's the Olympics or some championship, I've never seen a superstar go, okay, at this moment I'm bailing out. And so if she just had to do it, that's one thing. But it seems to be a trend because you also have Naomi Osaka, who kind of just pulled this the last 6 months. Also, the British tennis player in Wimbledon, Emma Raducanu. I don't really know how to say her last name, but she did that too. So there's a kind of like conformist trend, like this is okay. And I'm going to give some reasons why I do think it's not okay. First of all, Simone Biles makes gazillions of dollars in endorsements. And there's a lot of people around her that are actually dependent on her. So it's kind of like, you do got to kind of have to toughen up here. And, is this a war? People to get through. Is she a single mom with a kid who just got arrested with like life in prison? Like, you are an elite athlete, superstar entertainer, and, time to, toughen up a little bit. People go through shit.
Yeah,
and sometimes
I'm going to come in and play the devils.
Please do.
Which is that, look, it doesn't matter how much money you do make or don't make, how much work you do or don't do. And by the way, I mean, anybody to get to that position of sports, just that level of athleticism has been under pressure every freaking day for decades.
For
and
sure.
Under the surveillance and under the gun. And I think that when it becomes, it becomes more of a problem when because of social media, because of the press, because you're expected to do more than just be an athlete. You're supposed to represent. You're like somebody's hero. Watch what you fucking say. But again, I mean, so many people right now are having mental health issues because of all kinds of pressure. Just because you have money doesn't mean you don't have them. I mean, and we know this just by the amount of, people in actors and musicians who are coming out admitting that there's crumbling under the pressure or under social media or under the exhaust, or basically because maybe they just don't have the time to sit alone with themselves doing nothing, staring into space, grounding themselves out of the public eye. I mean, that's
fair enough. But I will not call her the greatest of all time until time will tell ultimately. But if it all stops tomorrow, I won't say shit. I mean, Michael Jordan, at least after his father was murdered, finished the season and then he took time off. It's like a lot of people are dependent.
Yeah, but okay, you know what? If she's already made millions of dollars, well, how dependent she needs another million because
no, but all these TV, all the crew, like there's just all these people who are not making lots of money. It's like, I couldn't picture you, Lydia, for instance, bailing out on tour. I've been pushed on my limits of like 200 shows a year, 50 flights a year where I'm like, I'm losing my mind. And
but I'm not going to compare myself to somebody that has to practice a sports discipline for 10 hours a fucking day for decades. I'm just not going to do it because
maybe you're also a different person.
I have a lot more freedom doing what I do than most people do doing whatever it is they do. So I have the luxury of that freedom because I've designed what I do to be something I can handle, and also that has plenty of time to recuperate from whatever you get or don't get from being on the road. So I think I'm not going to be even put into that.
All right. Well, then I'll go back to wars. But either way, I wish her the best. I hope she gets through what she gets through. She's an incredible athlete. I'm also going to be a little critical of it. It's like,
well, to me, look, it's sports. I really don't fucking give a shit with anybody. And I don't really fucking care. And the Olympics shouldn't be happening. And I love gym.
Fair enough.
But I just think, you can't tell somebody, because other people are dependent on you, buck up, Bucky. I mean, you can try it.
All right. One last point, though.
Because we don't suffer the ills that so many of our friends or other athletes or pop stars have, doesn't mean that their pain is not real. So whatever.
I think it is. I think it is real, but there is a point where you should be, I think, at least consider it. So if you imagine, if you're in the top 5. I'm in the
top 1. There's nobody in my competition.
I'm talking about in some category in the Olympics, and they said you're not making it. You didn't make the cut because it's great that this other person is better than you, and then they're like, you can't go to the Olympics, and then that person's like, I guess I'm not going to do it.
All right, you know what?
It's kind of an asshole thing to do.
I don't care about sports. I don't care about the fucking Olympics. I think it's all commercialized bullshit. Millions of dollars riding on the fact that somebody could run really fast, shoot a fucking basketball, do a couple of dumbbells, somersaults, stand on their fucking heads, swim faster than a fucking shark. I don't fucking care. It really does not impress me. I think it's stupid that they're having the fucking Olympics during COVID. I don't care.
I agree with that.
Think everybody should do whatever they want. If that means going fuck you in the middle of $1 million match, Whatever. I don't care. This is the Lydia and Spin. Lydia Lunch and Bob Calhoun. He'll be talking about the murders that made us. That means the murders that made San Francisco. This has been brought to you by no one, by the way. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our special guest, Bob Calhoun, who's just recently released incredible, and you know I'm a forensic freaks, The Murders That Made Us. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, how's it going, Lydia? How's it going, everybody?
How you doing? I'm Tim, by the way. I know it says Lydia Lunch because I'm in the other room, but
No, I was listening to a lot of the retrovirus, the Lydia Lunch retrovirus, and you're playing bass on that, right?
yes, that's what I do. You're in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
but
so-
you were mentioning your previous musical inclinations. What were those, Bob?
Oh yeah, I was Count Dante, which was a name I stole from a 70s kung fu huckster, and I wrestled in Incredibly Strange Wrestling with under that name, and my band was Count Dante and the Black Dragon Fighting Society, and we released a couple of records and played, and you know I used to wear a tiger stripe kimono, kind of like this tiger shirt here, and would
You are the real Tiger King.
Roar.
I was
you-
parodying the Tiger King before I knew who he was. Yes.
Well,
When was
you're
that,
intuitive.
by the way, Bob? When was that?
That was the 90s, and the band played through like I was played through like 2012, 2015.
that's-
Just kind of writing the latest book, just kind of like people started wanting me to write crime stories, and so that's where my artistic inclinations went for a while.
Well,
I had an audience.
What I love is that you have worn multiple hats, and it was our good friend Eugene Robinson, also a man of many hats, that introduced me to come to you, which I was not only was I excited to always meet somebody new, but we're actually doing a show together, you, me, and Eugene at the Makeout Room in San Francisco, August 5th. I can't wait.
Yeah, and you know the funny thing about all of this, like it's really coming full circle, because the first time I became aware of the force of nature that is Lydia Lunch was in this like tabloidy zine that Eugene put out called, I think it was called Birth of Tragedy.
It was called The Birth of very good memory, The Birth of Tragedy. Yes.
Yeah, I was probably still like a teen, but an adult teen. And I remember there was this photo of Eugene and you up against a tree.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about that picture, because it's
Uh-huh.
quite, actually, somebody mentioned it to me the other day, and it's a great shot. It's a photo by Richard Kern. You see, after we had done Kern and I Fingered, we wanted to do very controversial, the racist version of Fingered, which would have been Eugene as the only intelligent person amongst a bunch of redneck hillbillies. Oh, well, the drug money ran out. We never did it. But thank you for reminding me of that photo. That was an amazing magazine, The Birth of Tragedy. And I always think it's great when any teenage boy, adult teen or not, comes into my presence and now you're a full grown man. And not only that, but an ex-musician or still music and I don't professional or amateur punk wrestler. And now writing about murder. Bob, you're the total package, writing about murders.
It's funny because promoting this book, like I haven't done a lot of Zoom meetings. I haven't done a lot of things. I had to go back to my performance background, and like I didn't have a book release through a bookstore or anything launched. San Francisco was just coming out of COVID, and so I started doing readings on street corner. And
Whoa.
I love it. I mean,
Were-
look,
like
back
were
in-
you busking? Did you have like a tip jar out, or you just kind of just did it?
I would tell people to come out, because mostly people had bought it online or had bought it at bookstores and wanted it signed. So they were like people I knew on Facebook and things. So I would set it up on Facebook, and I did one in North Beach, and I did one at the Ferry Building. I did another set of readings at this oddities market in Alameda over by Oakland. So yeah, it was like I got a starred review for Murders That Made Us in Publishers Weekly. So in my mind, I thought, oh well, all the libraries and everybody will want me to do these kind of in conversation things through Zoom or whatever. And it's starting to happen now, but it didn't happen when the book first came out a couple months ago.
Well,
So
you know
I'm
what?
like,
Look, the book is going to have a long shelf life because, I mean, and right now, I mean, with COVID fog, whether people have had COVID or not, everybody's just now walking out of the molasses. And, it's one reason. Look, as always, we got to be pimping ourselves. Yeah, that's what we do. Murder was the case that they gave me. Well, murder was the murders that made us is the book that you sent me. And I'm very happy to have it. And going back to, I am a forensics freak. I love that you talk about Richard Ramirez in there. And I just, also what drew me in was that the first chapter is called My Mother Was a Murder Suspect. Tell us a little bit about that story, Bob, because that's so fascinating.
well, yeah, there was this story. My mom was like, she would talk in way too much detail about a fight she saw at the laundromat. I mean,
Whoa.
she like, I remember like, Mom, let's go shop for a washer and dryer, and she didn't want to get one because she liked to watch the conflict and strife of the laundromat. She
Oh,
wanted
yes.
she wanted to gossip about people fighting over dryers.
What area of the country was this?
This is Redwood City, which is now like a very kind of posh
Right.
Bay Area suburb that's filled with a bunch of Facebook engineers. But back then, that was still a place where the Redwood City I grew up in, which is about 30 miles south of San Francisco, there were still like, some dudes were working on lowriders, other dudes had the primer Camaro on blocks in their yard.
Don't even tell me about a non-painted Camaro, honey. I'm there.
But Bob, as an East Coast guy, I always think of the West Coast, just more space, and I always think people would have washers and dryers. So I maybe I'm a little ignorant here, but a laundromat in Redwood City seems already foreign to me, but I guess I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, there's still people who live in apartments or just can't afford them. And at certain points in my family's life, the washer and dryer broke down and we never replaced it. And then later it's like, we can replace this now, Mom. Let's replace it.
Back to Mom, who became a murder suspect because she became obsessed with a murder that happened and began talking about it. Am I correct? Like, she was a detailist about any kind of aggro that she could get her mouth around.
Well, this was more personal. So, I mean, she did tell the story, but I don't remember it as much as I remember all these other stories she told all the time. It was kind of it wasn't her pulling up a 7 and 7 and a cigarette and just dishing. She kind of got serious and it was a quieter tone. And what happened is, and then later, my mom was already gone. She was away, and I brought it up to my dad, and I was just thinking it was going to be, oh yeah, that story, but it was more, he got all quiet and he just said the victim's name, August Norrie. And August Norrie was a kind of handyman. He was a minor league ball player. And he, like, one day he was dumping lawn clippings on San Bruno Mountain, which is right at the edge of San Francisco in the suburbs, because people he was like a handyman and a gardener, and he was just dumping lawn clippings up there. And next thing you know, he is they find his bloody car down the hill. This is February 1959.
Right.
They find his bloody car.
And I'm just going to cut it for a minute. It's amazing that even any woman at that point, especially, would be a suspect, because usually the handymen are the ones doing the freaking killings.
Well, yeah, that was a thing where once they found Norrie's car, they found some kids that said that this young blonde woman almost ran them over, and she was speeding down the hill. And my family knew the Norries. My mom and my dad lived just 2 doors down from the Norrie family, and they were figuring that August Norrie was, was two-timing his own wife, and was in an affair with somebody. So my mom became a suspect, and she was grilled one day by homicide dicks, just one afternoon.
It must have been very exciting for her that day.
Yeah, and that was the story I was trying to get, was what, I was hoping to get police files and maybe even just read, this old 50s police file of my mom. I wasn't in the picture for 10 more years when this murder took place. But my dad said that, they were tailed by police. It took like about 3 months to find the murder they did. And that's in the first chapter of my book. And so it's not like my mom was the Zodiac killer or something and she's always a suspect. I mean,
Well, and also, I mean, look, it's 1959. I mean, forensics have come so far now that really, I saw one report that said they can actually take your DNA
it's
out
insane.
of the breath you've left in a room. I mean,
It's insane.
Forget, my life of crime has ended. Let's admit the fact that it's not beyond women to kill. It's just that men do most of it. And a lot of, there's so many different types of murder. And that's what's great about your book, because you go into so many different kinds of the violence. And I just want to read what the subtext title is, which is, the vigilantes, hoodlums, mob bosses, serial killers, cult leaders that made the San Francisco Bay Area what we all know it to be and have come to love. But I still do love that you mentioned Richard Ramirez. And my little tale about Richard Ramirez is this, I had an album called 1313. Richard Ramirez played some songs from it. I had believed in retrospect that I wrote some of those songs, Afraid of Your Company, Lock Your Door, about Richard Ramirez, but he existed after I wrote these songs. So in a way, I feel like I almost invented Richard Ramirez. See you in Disneyland, just saying. I'm not the one responsible for his crimes. Bob has written about Richard Ramirez.
So Bob, because I haven't read your book yet. I actually want to, but you're an expert on this. I've read that with a lot of serial killers, if they're men, when the libido goes down, the rates of homicide go down. That basically, as their boner is struggling more, so is their desire to prey. Is this anything you've run into or read about?
Yeah, I mean, it's that, or they just somehow, and probably it does coincide with their libido, is that they're, especially in these kind of unsolved cases, like Zodiac, like why did he stop? Did he go to jail for something else? There's those theories. Or did he just, for whatever reason, the chemical misfirings in that deranged brain just stop? And yeah, I mean, most of these murderers are sexual psychopaths, and it is they are achieving a sexual dominance, like Ed Kemper and Richard Ramirez, through these heinously violent acts.
Right. Ed Kempner, who, I mean, especially portrayed in Mindhunter, which I thought was a really good depiction of both the original FBI profiler and the serial killers he interviewed. They portrayed Ed Kempner so fantastically. And I mean, somebody that's like 6'8" has killed his grandparents, friends with the cops, tells the cops he's murdered his mother and her friend. They don't believe him, likes to cut off college students' heads, but still is somehow, almost minus the killings, a gentle giant. Very, very perverse.
Yeah. The funny thing about Kemper is he's like one of 3 mass murderers in Santa Cruz within like a 2-year span in the early 70s, because there's Herbert Mullins, who killed even more people than Ed Kemper, and there was John Lindley Frazier, I think. This is where I need notes. It's like there's so many cases in the Murders That Made Us, so many stories that I like.
Exactly.
I can't summon all these sick motherfuckers' names just all the time.
And Bob, I have to ask you, Bob, what do you think it is specific and indigenous and indicative of the American psyche that creates so many, because I have my own theory, serial killers in this country? And by the way, at any one given point, I mean, no matter how far forensics has come, I mean, this just includes this guy who was recently busted. I think his name was Smalls. This black man, rare for a black man to be a serial killer, who had killed 90 women and could draw their portraits and remember They said his IQ was so high he could remember every single one of them. What do you think it is that actually leads the American psyche into becoming, we'll just talk about serial killers and we'll go to other crimes that we as Americans are just number one?
I mean, there were serial killers in the 1890s, but you just have such this horrendous spike of them in the 70s and 80s, so much so that I had to start limiting. It's just like, I really should have a chapter on the zebra killers, but I was burning out on writing this crap.
Right.
And writing about these fiends, these people, it was just getting too depressing. And it was like, I'm trying to do this 170-year arc, and it like, you could have half the book taken up by 20 years.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Years.
But isn't that just communication, information, surveillance is all getting better? I mean, werewolves, all these mythical beasts weren't, a lot of people theorize that these were actually serial killers, say in 14th, 15th century Europe.
Now, Tim, I have to interrupt. No, sightings of werewolves were because the rye was poisoned and people were hallucinating that there were werewolves and witches.
No, but old corpses in some of these villages, and they think a human couldn't possibly have done that, and that's where they're.
You'd be surprised at what men can do. All right. Anyway,
well, that's what I'm saying.
Even if serial killings are going to go away because of forensic science,
doubt it.
Applied, and there will still be cases where the same thing from the Green River Killer or so many other serial killers.
Right, and if
they were prostitutes, we aren't going to take the time to use this technology to solve these crimes.
And if they don't have your DNA on file or your fingerprints because you haven't committed a previous crime that you're caught for, and if you travel around, I mean, there's so many ways, but still, I mean, what is it in the American psyche?
I can't really say, but I mean, there is definitely something wrong here. I mean, even if serial killings go away, we're still going to lead the world by far in mass shootings. And you have half of our government officials, and half of our state governments doing everything in their power to ensure that there will be more mass shootings. To protect ourselves from mass shootings, we must carry more guns.
Well, so Bob, my theory on that is, since World War II, America's basically had their hands in every global conflict, and in order for us to publicly be involved, we have to create a propaganda machine, and we dumb it down for the masses by saying good versus evil, and we have to kill. The justification of eradicating evil is, the justification for violence is because they're evil, really dumb. And then essentially, if you just dumb down any kind of conflict into basic terms like that, and you give guns to the masses, aren't you kind of breeding a recipe for disaster? I mean,
yeah, because we're in a constant level of kind of wartime propaganda where we're dehumanizing people, and we're dehumanizing our own people all the time. Does that explain serial killers? Not quite.
No.
It definitely explains the level of violence in this country, and
right.
Police mass murder as well, police killings.
I had a theory the other day, which might be quite controversial, but in the scope of war, not serial killing, which is, serial killing on a mass level, which America exports. And right now in so many countries, I mean, there's problems in Cuba, there's problems in South America, there's problems in so many, Middle Eastern countries. The Taliban is taking over. It's terrifying. But one concept I had the other day was, if the enemy of your morals, whether it's from religion or just whatever false morality that war whores think they have a right to execute people, why are they destroying buildings? Like, why are you committing crimes against architecture? And in resulting, we're creating millions of refugees. Now, maybe is really the enemy so sadistic that they'd rather have people living in living hell forever as refugees, starving to death, 400,000 people in Ethiopia right now in one city? Then and why are you destroying the buildings? Like, if they really were intellectual killers, they would just find a way, and we have it, to eliminate the people, leave the architecture alone. Now, I'm not even going to explain why I thought that. I'm just like, bombing entire villages and cities and then turning millions of people into refugees. Well, that is a living fucking hell. And I guess anybody who believes in hell, which would be religious fanatics, I don't even think they think that far. Now, us in America, with the violence that we have, is on a very different level. And it's mainly because we have not really, we export war and mass violence. And now the violence that we have here, which is, a sense of serial mass murdering, not serial killing, is outrageous, because I think people have been fucking lied to for so long, and they feel so inadequate that anything threatens them.
Yeah, it's crazy because every community in America is basically at a wartime footing with itself. It's basically an arsenal. It's just nuts. Now back to San Francisco, which is what I know a little more about than these kind of questions writ large across America. Is San Francisco, the Anglo-American San Francisco, is a city founded by vigilantes, and its birth is in crime and punishment, and people taking the law into their own hands and often hanging the wrong people, and this kind of authoritarian vigilante movement, and it's born out of conflict also between pro-slave people and anti-slave people, and Irish Catholics versus Protestants, and the terrible
So even though
thing.
even though you're focusing on San Francisco, really it is an American condition that you are talking about, but you're just referring it to one city.
Just different.
When basically it's the whole country. This country was founded by mass murderers who did not want religious freedom. They wanted religious persecution. So you're just in the murders that made us 170 years of all kinds of murders in San Francisco. You're relating it to one city when really it is a universal American problem. And also interesting about your Chicago San Francisco connect.
Oh yeah, mostly just through the figure of Al Capone, but who ends up in Alcatraz. But then the weird thing is his lieutenants from Chicago kind of follow him out here. And there's like kind of mob hits of them in North Beach. Like the people, Capone's in San Francisco, nobody can visit him. He's in Alcatraz, but then, his consigliaries and whatnot end up taking over the San Francisco underworld. And so there's a few stories of that. But the weird thing is that the whole reason Alcatraz happened is because of Dillinger kept breaking out of prisons, and it was embarrassing the federal government and the FBI and everybody else. And so they created this prison on Alcatraz that was believed to be inescapable, that you couldn't escape from, to put Dillinger, even though they killed him by the time it happened. So it was like, who else do we have rotting in an American prison that's as big a name as Dillinger that we can send to Alcatraz to make an example of it? That was Al Capone.
I mean, we don't even have the time or the energy to go into the horror of the American prison system, which I spent a lot of time talking about under Bill Clinton, especially in Texas. 3 strikes, you're out, motherfucker, with an asshole. And we know where it is today because America has more prisoners than Russia, than China. I'm not going back into that tired old trope I've spoken so often about. But the thing is, we have so much personal violence and we have so much mental disability in this country. And I think a lot of that problem is because bad nutrition, ill nurturing as children, and the stupidity of the American population by not knowing what real history is.
But Lydia, you talk about how we talk about it a lot on this podcast, how it's hard to sever the chain of abuse. I mean, to get to California, whether you're an Okie living in Bakersfield or whatever, I mean, and that kind of Wild West vigilante mentality. If you fought for anything, I'm just maybe stepping out, playing a little devil's advocate here. You fought for anything, I can almost understand, like, well, I'm not putting up with any fucking shit, and I'm gonna fucking hold my own ground here, especially in the lawlessness of just the expansion of the West. And what I'm getting at, Bob, is
lawless country to begin with.
But what I'm getting at, Bob, whether this is America or just the history of wars, do you ever think that murder or violence is justified?
Murder and violence are justified. Like, what do you mean? Like you killing your neighbor, or
no. I'm just talking about the history of just violent murder, and you're an expert on many levels of this. Have you ever looked at some of these cases and thought to yourself, well, you know what would anyone do in this fucking situation?
Yeah, I don't really. The typical narrative about the San Francisco vigilantes is that they were justified in doing this because things were so violent and out of hand. And the more I read about them, the more I realized that we've been taking violent mob's word for it for too long.
Okay.
And that even in the cases where, some of these Aussie Aussie gang members, these kind of Australian gangs, were probably pretty rough, and maybe you could come up with a justification for what the Vigilantes did, but so often they were after the wrong people, or they tried to hang just some guy who looked at them, and then it boiled down into like, oh, you have a foreign accent, we're going to beat the crap out of you.
Misdirection.
So that leads me to think that the violence is never really justified, because if you were a god and you could know who was guilty, then maybe, but we aren't. We're people.
Right.
Well, let me just tell you exactly why I think he's fucking guilty, and that's any fucking octogenarian who's a millionaire or billionaire who's in positions of fucking political power that's telling the rest of us what to fucking do, that encourage violence among those that really do not have what they will ever have, and that cause it to be other against other. That's who I think is fucking guilty. I think that is violence justified? No, we're supposed to swallow it and fucking take it. The thing is, the wrong people are often armed. So what? We arm everybody? How do we make this equation work? The fact is, men basically, because it is usually men, it is men who run the fucking world and ruin it, have the fucking ammunition that women, as a matter of fact, I wish we could get all the women and children out of Afghanistan for what's going on right now, crushing gay men with walls. That's just one issue. So I know what the fucking problem is. So are we supposed to just sit here and take it? When is violence justified? The problem is the people that should be violently incensed are actually more intellectually adept to realize, oh, violence doesn't solve violence. Well, violence has solved almost every fucking violent situation in this country. But now it is the most vulgar of violent people that have the ammunition that are doing stupid shit. I'm not the judge, jury, or I don't believe in any God that's going to level that playing field. It's a fucking conundrum. I don't know the answer. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia and Bob Calhoun, whose book is called The Murders That Murder is the Case That, I think that's Snoop Dogg, that they gave us, The Murders That Made Us. I'm just saying, I have naturally intellectually violent tendencies, okay? Because I don't understand why we still have to kill somebody who's different than we are. What I mean, I just don't get, not that I don't think occasionally violence and even murder is justified, but it's usually the wrong people committing it for the wrong reason. What is the right fucking reason? Somebody's been abusing you for decades. Hello. I mean, but that means all of the US government should have been assassinated. I'm not preaching that, because otherwise, well, murder is the case they're going to give me just for opening my fucking mouth. Now, we're talking about Bob's book, not my philosophy. I'm just saying.
Well, and yeah, there is that side of it too. Like there's always this kind of push to aggrieved people, people calling for defund the police, people calling for an end to police violence, to like be nonviolent. But if you think about it, even Martin Luther King was basically calling, there was still a threat of violence, not from the civil rights protesters, but Martin Luther King is calling on the federal government to use its power for violence to desegregate the South and desegregate the United States, that it's only through the FBI and the National Guard that you can desegregate these schools and universities and these lunch counters and everything else, that there is this call that the state needs to use its power for violence to liberate African Americans throughout the South and the whole of the United States, Chicago, everywhere else.
I'd say I wanted to talk to you about that, and it's just who has the license to kill and who doesn't. And so, it's Dr. Strangelove, the movie, portray the Nazis that were basically beneficial for our own military intelligence. They're adopted, or you go as far as Chomsky loves to talk about John Negroponte. It's like, he worked his way up through Reagan in Central America, and then next thing you know, he gets the phone call, hey, do you want to be the ambassador to, I think it was the Philippines or whatever. It's like being a made man basically on the government scale. And if you're really like objective and step outside of it beyond just what's legally allowed, how do you compare a fucking vigilante to someone who's basically endorsed by the Pentagon?
Yeah. I really should have reread Camus' The Stranger before, or not The Stranger, the Rebel.
Right.
That's the book. I don't know if you've read it, but
Yes, of course. Yeah.
yeah, that's the book where Camus goes into when is violence justified, and who do we give authority to commit violence for?
And look, basically, any violence committed is for very few reasons. It's either out of desperation, right, stupidity of and fear of other, or capitalism. I mean, America exports war. Countries fight over God, land, oil, and the average individual, which they have no concern about, is the one that suffers. And then on the same, we have mass incarceration, which is a long-term living death, which is ridiculous. And it's just, I don't understand how society as a whole, or even, well, I do believe that there are some parts of the world that have actually progressed, and that would be like Scandinavia in certain parts, and actually most of Europe, where you don't see the kind of violence you see here. You do see peaceful protests. I don't know if they actually work. Look, there were millions of people, millions protesting in Barcelona against many of the wars. Did it work? I'm not so sure. The thing is, when I hear about calling in a strike, I think that people should march to the homes of the politicians who are polluting the country with bad policies. And right now, let's face it, we have a lot of asshole politicians. And, how do we take on the whole global situation? We can't. So how do we even take on the situation in this country? I'm not sure we can. So then it then narrows down to, how do we even take on the individual serial killer, mass murderer, or mass shooter? I'm not sure we can. I don't know if there is a solution, but I do know who the proprietors of these crimes are. And not to be, what would the word be? Sexist? But I am. Just saying.
Part of the reason I shouldn't talk about what I didn't write about, but the zebra killers, they were these African-American Muslim, basically a gang of serial killers that, killed a lot of white people in the mid 70s in San Francisco.
Reason was?
It was basically a striking back against what they saw as the white establishment.
So would they go after the white establishment, or just the white average idiotic Joe Schmo?
They, a little bit of both, because they did one of their victims who survived, took a bullet from them, was Art Agnos, who later became the mayor of San Francisco. And in the movie Milk, he's like the guy who's always telling Harvey Milk, Sean Penn, like, oh, you can't go this fast, he's like the kind of older guard, right, liberal. I forget who plays him in the film, but they just killed random people in a laundromat too, another laundromat. But part of
it goes, go ahead, Bob.
Part of the reason I kind of put off writing that until too long is because any other story I wrote because I was doing these stories for the SF Weekly for a while, and that developed a lot of the material that's in the book, and that was rewritten and repurposed for the book. Anytime I wrote a story where an African American killed a white person, I would find my story linked to on like really scary ass Daily Stormer type
so
website.
Annoying.
Like as like proof that black people are just predisposed to violence, and they're out to kill white people and out to kill.
By the way, I wouldn't blame them if that was so, but actually black on black violence is more prevalent than black on white violence. White cops on black people is more prevalent than just about anything. There's usually only white serial killers, middle-aged men, younger than middle-aged, and only white men doing these mass shootings. So actually black on black crime is the problem, and that is territorial. That is sad. That is the way it is. And again, I don't understand. I do actually, but this is just such an American mindset about how to solve issues, which is really not private assassination or war as a multiplicity of assassinations against people that don't agree with you or are occupying land. Hello.
So were you a fan of wrestling before WWF basically took over cable television and became the monster it became?
That was like when that was I was kind of a young teen when that was going on. So that was, I remember watching like kind of, I would see AWA, which was kind of out of Minnesota, but they had taken over the San Francisco area.
Superfly Snuka before were you into him and all that stuff?
Yeah, I only became aware of him through WWF.
Okay.
Andre the Giant sweat so much it was from under his armpits to down to his waistband. I met him on a plane, actually. I couldn't believe he even fit on a plane. He was that huge.
Bob, do you drink?
I'm drinking right now.
He's drinking
all right.
whiskey.
Okay. So of course, of course you know about
drinking,
Andre the Giant's drinking abilities.
I think this is wild turkey and soda. But
I thought so.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. No, I mean, he can drink
Moscow mules.
the first book I wrote was a ghostwriting project. Before I wrote my own wrestling book, I wrote the autobiography of Judo Gene LaBelle, who is a big commodity in the LA area, but he was also a stuntman. And he's basically the guy that the Brad Pitt character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is based on.
By the way, I hate to say it, but Brad Pitt was amazing in that film. Really
I hate him, but I liked him in that movie.
Don't make guys like that anymore. I wish they did.
Gene's the guy, he was the ringer brought in on the Green Hornet, and he airplane spun Bruce Lee. And then they later trained together for a year because Gene was a 2-time judo champ. So he just has this amazing career in pro wrestling. So he had all these Andre the Giant stories and stories of Andre the Giant drinking a keg. He was Roddy Piper's mentor in pro wrestling.
Roddy Piper. Come on. We gotta love. What was your wrestling book called, Bob?
My wrestling book is Beer, Blood, and Cornmeal, because in Incredibly Strange Wrestling, the promoter realized that people want to throw things at the wrestlers. So she supplied them with corn tortillas. So if you
have to say, I just saw that come up in my email or my newsfeed, and I'm like, I got to check this out. I didn't know you were the author. I cannot wait.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I can send you a copy if you want.
Give me one when we meet. Give me one when we meet in.
So in wrestling, basically became as unified, corporatized, through cable television in the 80s, and you have like LA glam metal meets NFL, which is basically the NFL cocktail: painkillers, steroids, and speed, and then the Sunset Strip glam metal is like just cocaine and booze, and then you put that all together. And motherfuckers just don't live very long, but the sacrifice is something that's kind of amazing, and it's almost heartbreaking. What did you think of the movie The Wrestler? Did you like that or not?
Everything in that movie is very real to me.
I liked it.
It's funny as there's this kind of newer show in Oakland called Hood Slam. That's a very kind of weird alternative wrestling show. And it's probably more successful than Incredibly Strange Wrestling. I mean, they've done way more shows than we ever did, but they brought me kind of to announce, it's like, oh, yeah, who did this in the past, and we're going to have you as the color commentator, like the Jesse Ventura role or Bobby the Brain Heenan role.
Wait, stop. Jesse the Body Ventura, my favorite governor and conspiracy theorist of all time. I love Jesse Ventura. I'm going to admit it. Navy SEAL, knows what goes on, has told the truth. I have to say, we need more people like that. He's not what he appears to be. He's he is a freedom fighter. He's pretty on the money.
But I'm driving back from this Hood Slam show over the Bay Bridge, and I have the dumb classic rock station on because I'm just too adult
nerdy
to put something on. and Round and Round by Rat came on, which there's a scene in The Wrestler with that song.
I actually love that song.
Yeah, there's a scene in The Wrestler where that song prominently, and I'm like, man, this is really hitting home. This is like me, the broken down older pro wrestler guy, still trying to cling to the glory. And there's Rat with Round and Round.
Bob, you have graduated, you have progressed, you have transcended. You're now an announcer.
Yeah.
So Bob Mould was writing scripts for wrestling,
Yeah.
and of course, you can't ignore again the Tom of Finland physique with the speedos and basically how that's presented, and certain elements of gay culture that is really into wrestling, and just like glam metal, these guys who are wearing all the makeup. So I always found the sexuality of all these things to be, this hyper macho thing that's being presented, and yet the flamboyant decorations are.
You know what, Tim? I would peg them all. Come on.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would. All right, sorry.
And they don't like it.
Well, that was always a problem for Incredibly Strange Wrestling too. Is like we had El Homo Loco, and he was everybody's kind of favorite. He was like the Hulk Hogan of Incredibly Strange Wrestling, and we had these out gay characters, and we would often book them as the baby face. They were. I wrestled El Homo Loco once, and he was really drunk. And he just basically his whole attack was to pummel my nuts for 5 minutes. And I was really glad when that match was over.
Did you make? No, I mean he should have tended gently to them after the match was over. Turn around is fair play.
So my step aunt was doing some wrestling promotion in Massachusetts for whatever fucking reason. And at some point she ended up meeting Mankind, also known as Nick Foley.
Yeah.
And not as dumb as he appears.
She said it's the sweetest guy, kind of a folk art. You probably know more about him than I do. Was he Long Island? I don't know what he was, but he sent in a videotape, just such a freak that he actually worked his way to the top out of nowhere. Is that true?
We did my band did a show with him. There's this band from the Bay Area called Arnocorps, which is this Arnold Schwarzenegger parody band, but really they debunk him. They're this punk metal band. And so I realized that Mick Foley was doing stand up. And
I didn't know that.
What?
Yeah, he does kind of spoken word stand up, and it's a lot of
Why
stories.
don't we have him on the bill?
We have to have him. We have to have him on. Yes, there we go.
I'm never performing without Mick Foley again.
But we booked him at Slim's in San Francisco, and it was my band opened, and then he did the middle set because it's kind of hard even for Foley. We just kind of bracketed him. We gave him the slot he actually wanted, which is the middle set, and he's basically the headliner. And then Arnocorps closed the show. But yeah, after that he got an agent. But it was,
wow. I gotta research some Mick Foley action here. Yeah. I'm very interested, and I love true stories. All right, he might need to be on the show.
He wanted to do like a parody of Sweet Home Alabama. And we actually backed him for that. And it was just kind of him like singing the chorus and saying various kind of things about how much Alabama sucks. And just
was it Leonard Skinner?
Yeah, Leonard Skinner.
I did cover. Wait, Tim. I did cover That Smell by Leonard Skinner. Because I love saying, smell of death surrounds you. Yeah.
Bob, we can edit this out, but I have a question. Have you ever done anabolic steroids?
I haven't. I mean, nobody really. we had some guys that were really trying to make it in mainstream wrestling that did do roids, that would go on cycles of roids. And,
Tim saw me go on a 3-minute roid rage.
Most of us were wrestling for beer. We did not think we were going to make it.
So Bob, if you and I were wrestling, what would it be for?
What would it be for? What would motivate us?
I'm going to let you just cogitate on that. You see, I don't wrestle.
It would be wrestling for love, Lydia. For love.
Tough love, Bob. Tough love.
Tough love. Yeah, that's what it would end up being.
Oh, come on! You think Mick Foley's a softie? Hello. What about me? What about womankind? What about womankind?
Womankind's
a good idea. Bob, question. With all your research and all these subjects, and it doesn't mean you condone any of these people's behavior or anything. Who's your favorite murderer and who's your favorite wrestler?
Ooh.
You're not endorsing what they did. I'm just saying
not endorsing anything.
Who drew you in the most? Like who fascinated?
And look, what Tim says, favorite murderer, I think he means most fascinating.
Fascinating.
Well, yeah, you know, it's an abstract question. It's not. You're not condoning any of this. I'm just saying.
Oh, I'm gonna on murderer, like staying with the kind of serial killer thing. I guess I have to say Zodiac because the mystery still remains, and he was crazy enough to wear a crazy hood with his Zodiac symbol on it,
uniform,
like he's a
exactly.
Batman villain.
Right.
He went that extra yardage with that. Wrestler.
Wait, Bob, excuse me, before we get into the rest, what about another serial killer that has not been found called the Happy Face Killer, who was killing frat boys and dumping them in small bodies of water and leaving a happy face on the tree nearby? They thought it was a number of serial killers all over the country. We can talk about that later. Favorite wrestler?
Favorite wrestler? You know, it's going to have to be Ric Flair.
Okay.
I mean, Dusty Rhodes kind of speaks to me. His oratory really speaks to me, but Flair could definitely match him in that. Flair's just so much better in the ring and kind of lasted so much longer.
And what a great spoken word artist.
I mean, anything I've done in spoken word is influenced by both of those guys.
You know what? I mean, if anybody is a professional wrestling spoken word artist, I'll challenge you to that. August 5th at the Makeout Room. We'll see who's making out with who. Bob Calhoun versus Eugene Robinson and Lydia and Eugene. I got backup.
Going back to Zodiac Killer, if you want to start like, you know, superheroing these characters, you know, there's so many in the Bay Area. I guess Ted Kaczynski is like the anti-Bay Area because he was an anti-technology serial killer. That was his motivation, anti-tech.
Yeah. And he, you know, his last murder, his last bombing was of a professor at UCSF at University of California, San Francisco.
Right, exactly. So, yeah. No, I never quite got the right handle on his story because I always had to take a slice of like their Bay Area-ness, San Francisco-ness, and I never got it right. Bob, just like all the Trumpers and stuff that don't see themselves in the future and they're basically trying to destroy everything, he was way ahead of his time. He was he was seeing where the tech revolution was going, and he was basically doing his best. You know, he had a super high intelligence, but he was basically like, I want to destroy the tech movement here. I mean, that was his motivation for sure. What's
interesting is that there was a spate of like pipe bombs and bomb killings, which seemed to have fallen off because any idiot with a couple hundo in their pocket can get a fucking gun and take out 15 people at one time with no more moral or motive behind it, which is kind of the place that we're at right now. Let's face it. It's sick. It's sad. It's America. Hello, assholes.
The SLA was that's what they were after the Donald DeFreeze Sinque was, you know, burned alive by the LAPD and
my God,
in Watts or in South Central, like, you know, the Patty Hearst and
it's heavy.
The others were doing these kind of low level bombing campaigns, basically kind of pipe bombs and things.
Wasn't the biggest serial killer on record that Ukrainian doctor though, right?
God, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
How about the American government? How about the American government is the biggest serial killer on record ever?
well, that's the next thing, right? And that's what we're talking about. But the Americas, I mean, are gang members in the Americas, drug cartels, who have killed many people, are hitmen. Like, are these serial killers? You know, if there's we like to romanticize the obsession and the loner, but versus the contracted.
I have to jump in because the difference between America and Europe, and you just nailed it, is that in America and in the Americas, because life is so meaningless, whereas in Europe, after all the wars they've actually had to repair from, realizing, especially in a place like Spain where I live,
not that long ago,
right, but that they learned that, you know what, actually life should be precious And in America, since we never really had, since the Civil War, any major, I mean, 9/11 doesn't count because that only, not that it didn't affect the whole country, but really from within is the enemy always, is the difference is when life for individuals or life in a country has very little value because people have been lied to, they're depressed, they're not making enough money, and the quality of life sucks. People become far more violent. And in Europe, the reason why we don't see more serial killers and we don't see more mass violence or mass shootings is because the quality of life is so much fucking better. And what America doesn't get, because we keep them ignorant here, that is not our listeners, but that is the Trumpers, is that life could be and should be different. But in this country, we paint anything that could be beneficial to the fucking individual or the community as socialism or communism, you fucking idiots.
Not
If
the only
life
reason. Not the only reason.
improved, people are less violent.
Yeah,
I don't know what
sure.
more to say on this. I just actually want to wrap it up and say, because Tim, you better calm me down because I'm getting violent.
I'm gonna calm you down. Oh, Bob, I have more questions for you. You know, wrestling, murderers. This is an obsession on violent behavior. Have you ever been violent against someone without being provoked?
No. I mean,
well,
I was kind of, you know, actually, if we go back to being kids, you know, you're bullied sometimes, but then you decide to bully somebody else and you pay it forward. I have engaged in that where I look back at it and go, well, I was 9 years old, but I was a total dick, and throwing rocks at those guys for no fucking reason was totally wrong of me. So
if you're bullied, I don't know how much you were bullied, but if you're bullied a bunch, and if you're smart, and you seem to be smart, maybe, am I wrong that your obsession with irrational violence is led you to a career, whether that's theater violence, which is irrational, or just murder, which is irrational?
My middle book, that was of course also the book that I had to self-publish, was Shattering
What's the name?
Conventions, which was about conventions.
What was the name of it?
For a while, Shattering Conventions. So it was like me going to a bunch of different conventions and trade shows, and you know, there was Comic-Con, but I also went to a Republican convention and went to gun shows. So yeah, I guess there is still violence at the tips of that, but I mean, yeah, violence, it's a topic that sells, it's a topic that fascinates, and you know, I have that dark side where I'm, you know, I expressed myself through theatrical violence. And then with the murder book, it started as an assignment where I stage where I'm a little bit older now. So SF Weekly wanted me to write this regular true crime column, and it was kind of seen as kind of intellectual clickbait or historical clickbait. But after a while, you know, this is my gig and this is what I'm doing. And so there has to be a darker side to some screw loose to get me to do that for years.
Please let me come in. And I know it's rude, but, and I've been talking this about this with my friends for a little while now. Whoever, you know, with the tech revolution, who would have ever thought Revenge of the Nerds would have been this fucking violent between the Silicon Valley engineers and then the fucking incels that machine gun a fucking cafeteria because they get rejected by a fucking girl. It's so interesting that the violence, at least on the front conspicuous level or the unexpected level, there's a level of a real Revenge of the Nerds that we're seeing on the planet right now.
I just have to say one thing. I have to cut in about incels, not to defend them. It doesn't start with just the rejection of a girl or multiple girls. It starts with the fact that they're probably neglected from their fucking parents who left them in front of the idiot box with that as a babysitter. So I think that neglect is an American form of abuse, which that generation of incels is not just being rejected by girls, rejected and not paid attention to by their fucking parents, which causes them to feel as if life has no value. And especially women ignore them because they have no game, because they haven't been taught how to do fucking anything. Come in, Bob, if you choose.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Not just that one moment. That's the moment that they believe it happened, but there was already something kind of wrong with them. And yeah, usually it is the parents or the abusive or whoever it is,
bloodline.
You know? Yeah, or going to terrible church services.
Totally.
Yeah,
It's the abolition of the individual in this country that leads to all sorts of fucking incredibly stupid violence. That's what it's about. That's what we try to counteract on the fucking Lydia and Spin by presenting individuals with different opinions from different creative backgrounds with multiple hats that they wear that people may or may not know, so that we hope that we can expand a comprehension of just a creative divinity that has chosen art as opposed to a machine gun. My mouth made appear as one because I'm blowing bullets out of it all the time, better than out of my mouth than out of my ass. I'm just saying, this is the Lydia and Spin. This is what we do. Bob Calhoun, the book that he just released, I can't wait to finish reading it, is The Murders That Made Us. Out now, August 5th, Makeout Room. Come if you dare. Eugene Robinson, Lydia Lunch, Bob Calhoun, Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and this was with Bob Calhoun.
Thank you, Bob.
Oh, thank you. Oh, one thing.
Please keep on going. Keep on going.
Oh, the show August 5th at the Makeout Room. Chapter 3 of The Murders That Made Us is about the haunted church of Bartlett Street, and that is like a half block from the haunted church, the former location where Theodore Durant murdered 2 women and stuffed them in the bell tower, is like a half block from the Makeout Room.
I'm going to be reading actual letters from Eileen Wuornos, and then in one I contradict her theories. It's going to be fun.
Bob, I was trying to bring up, and we didn't have a chance, is with like serial killing stalkers, ultimately when they're incarcerated, they're stalked by women that are who are obsessed with serial killers. It's like they get so many propositions in jail. It's like the stalker becomes the stalkee. It's so insane.
See you in
Disneyland. This isn't anything new, because the case that I just mentioned from 1895 with the haunted church, Theodore Durant, who killed these 2 women, he was a Sunday school teacher, and he murdered these 2 women, kind of probably an incel type guy. He was a handsome enough guy in that when he was arrested, charged with the crimes, and the trial was starting, the San Francisco jail just got so many letters from these women that loved him and wanted to reform him or didn't believe he was a murderer. So I mean, way before Richard Ramirez, almost 100 years.
How many
mistrials was Richard Ramirez when women are like, I'm in love with him, I have to stop? There's more than one mistrial because a juror fell in love with Richard Ramirez just sitting in the jury box.
I hear he smelled like a goat.
Yeah, him and Manson had that hot garbage odor.
Look, sometimes I think it's just women want to be the puppet masters of murderers because they're not going to do it themselves often enough. I'm not sure. Anyway, that needs to be said. Yeah, go ahead.
It is a phenomenon, and it has gone on for a very, very long time.
Well, murder fantasy is also a thing. So there's going to be
thanatos.
Right.
So there's going to be some women that are just going to be into it. Come on.
All right. That takes up another day or night, and one more night of our life. One more night of our lives, Tim. We talk about it all the time. Anyway, I've already said the exit. I'm not going to say it again. Bob, I can't wait to hang out with you and perform with you.